don't know the first thing about what they're covering. I mean, can you have somebody cover these topics that at least could pass an Econ 101 course or at some point in their lives did, so you can get away from these absurd, embarrassing, imbecilic conversations like the one that Chuck Todd had with NBC business reporter Stephanie Ruhle. I mean,
how is she even a business reporter?
Not even the basics.
We've got the wage gains, increases prices, that eats back into the wage gains. What stops this circular sort of spiraling upwards of inflation? What puts a halt to it?
Well, listen, Michael is not wrong. This is not inflation in isolation. It is 100% connected to COVID. And we should remind our audience, and frankly, the administration should as well, they knew it was going to be a complicated and bumpy economic recovery. That's why we have expanded child tax credit, right? You've got families of 60 million children in this country getting on average of $460 a month because of that. You're worried about people who are on fixed incomes. All of us are. But come next year, that inflation adjustment is going to be up 5.9%. So they've made those adjustments. They knew this was going to be rocky, but the question, well, when are prices going to go back down? Here's the dirty little secret. Why will they? There's a record amount of household savings in this country, and we might not like these high prices, but we're lining up to pay it. We've got booming consumer demand. We have booming consumer spending. You're right. You can't get a new dishwasher. One of the reasons, because an enormous amount of people are renovating their kitchens because they've saved so much in the last year.
The dirty little secret, although it's not much of a secret, is that you're a moron, Stephanie Ruhle. If you produce less, sooner or later, you have to consume less. Strictly looking at the consumer side is Ruhle, and then suggesting that more funny money is the way this is being addressed, and that's an appropriate way to address it. They knew this was going to be a bumpy ride. Is that why they suggested that inflation would be transitory and continue to this very moment trying to spend trillions more in funny money? I mean, even if consumption is currently high, at some point it will fall relative to expectations and production. That's just basic, and I mean basic, economics. And so you can understand why so many people are misinformed and don't appreciate what's happening, other than sort of what they're experiencing in terms of their purchasing power at the pump or at the grocery store, is because you have dum-dums. And I just cannot stress this enough because it is so reckless and frustrating that so many people in positions of information sharing haven't the first clue about the information they're sharing. In stark contrast to that, we're pleased to be joined now by Thomas Vartanian. He's the executive director of the Financial Technology and Cybersecurity Center and author of 200 Years of American Financial Panics, Crashes, Recessions, Depressions, and the Technology That Will Change It All. Professor Vartanian, please, thanks for joining us again. Pleased to have you.
Thanks, Dan and Amy. I'm pleased to be back.
Well, I know I want to get to some of these, metaverse and cryptocurrency issues, but first, just on the matter of inflation, so that there's some additional voice of sanity on the topic. What is your handle on where we're at and where this is going in the context of the fiscal and monetary policies emanating from Congress and the Fed, respectively?
Well, that's a great question, Dan, and it's sort of the focus of my book. You know, I served in the government during the savings and loan crisis, and many people won't remember the landscape there, but inflation hit about 15%. 15%. Interest rates, long-term interest rates hit 21%. And I can remember meetings with Paul Volcker, and we were trying to figure out what to do. And Paul's response at that point, and the only tools he had, was to begin to raise interest rates. And it was at that point, I think, that the government and the Fed figured out that they could manage the economy in ways that it had never done before. And it's only increased as crisis after crisis has increased. So what's happened now? In the last two crises, 2008 2008, 2009, 2010, and 2020, the government has flooded the economy with money. And there's only so long you can flood the economy with money, with overspending by the government. We now have a $30 trillion debt. That the Federal Reserve Board buying assets, it now has a balance sheet asset total of $8 trillion. Before 2007, it was $800 billion. So it's now $8 trillion. And this is the most startling factor. I think 56% of the treasuries that have been issued in the last year have been purchased not by the public, but by the Federal Reserve Board. So in effect, we've got this manufactured economy that at some point has to sort of sling out of control. And I've been writing about that for several years, just basically because of the amount of money that's been forced into the economy and the number of bad policy decisions that have accompanied it.
Right, and this idea that I'm all for looking at the economy through the eyes of the consumer, but that necessarily includes productive capacity, and this is just being sort of looked past. We have people making sort of generic references to a supply chain challenge that we have right now that we're working on, and pretending that you can have consumption without production, almost, which is what you more or less heard from Rule.
Yeah, and this is, you put your finger on the problem. It is a highly complex set of factors that go into what makes up the economy, what makes up markets, and how they interrelate between each other and drive each other. And the problem is we tend to, from a political point of view or from a cable TV or internet point of view, we tend to dumb it down to its simplest concepts and make political decisions that have nothing to do with economic reality. And that's where we are right now. And that's why I'm pretty pessimistic about us digging our way out of this when every response is political. And, I don't know where we're going to find the leadership to try to fix that.
Well, how much is the supply chain issue factored into inflation?
Well, I mean, that's a good question. I think the supply chain, the supply chain issue is one, again, that is driven by many factors, as Don has suggested. And I think COVID has something to do with it. But to the extent that we're not producing any goods anymore or getting those goods to their ultimate end users, the price has to go up. Look what's happened to housing in the last 24 months. The median price of housing in America, and this is sort of the ultimate supply chain problem, the median price of housing has increased 25% in 1 year. 25%. I mean, you can't keep having those kinds of shortages and demand and end up with an economy that does not sort of spiral into an inflationary environment.
Mm-hmm. And I want to get to this other topic because of the big splash announcement Mark Zuckerberg made with the renaming of Facebook, the Meta, because he wants to focus on people's attention on the metaverse, which is his focus. And you in a piece that you wrote for The Hill, express some concerns about the forthcoming metaverse and the associated technology. Could you elucidate those concerns?
Yeah, sure, Dan. Look, I mean, I don't think there's anybody out there who understands that we are slowly but surely moving ourselves into a virtual world, and that virtual world is highly insecure. And I've come to the conclusion, having worked with companies for 30 years, putting them into cyberspace, building online presence, that we have put ourselves in a very difficult situation. And Mr. Zuckerberg's oft-quoted mantra, move fast and break things, is now, in hindsight, extremely dangerous strategy. Because what's happened is we've sort of run ourselves into a virtual world that has no rules, right? Who is it out there who invites somebody into their house and says, look, just rifle through all my drawers and all my personal materials. If you find anything, just take it. Well, that doesn't happen in the real world, in the analog world, but it sure happens in cyberspace. And unfortunately, too many people actually invite strangers into their virtual world to take whatever they want. And so here's the bottom line, and the question I would ask every viewer out there, and that is, if we can't secure the virtual world we already have created, and we can't, it is insecure. If we can't secure that world, we shouldn't be moving haphazardly to the next virtual world, the metaverse, where we're going to tie together all these virtual realities in one big marketplace where technologists can take advantage of consumers and take information, and the consumers are left holding the bag with literally no security, as businesses are too, literally no security in these virtual worlds to protect them. And here's the bottom line. The bottom line is we're creating vulnerabilities in the virtual worlds, whether it be the internet, the metaverse, or whatever. We're creating vulnerabilities twice as fast as we're creating solutions to those security and vulnerability problems. Why is that? The why is that is because we've allowed the marketplace to reward innovation and not punish insecurity. So if you're coding a new product, if you're creating software, if you're building new hardware, it's more important to get it to market quickly, to get the innovators first place in line and sort of the premium on being there first, and worry about security later. That is a huge mistake we've made. We should not have let anything come to market without standards of security.
What role does cryptocurrency play in enhancing the security in the virtual world, secure transactions specifically? And are we moving in the direction of cryptocurrency ultimately? I mean, maybe the timeline is imponderable at this point, but ultimately replacing, fiat currency?
Yeah. So, that's the question that's on everybody's minds this day as cryptocurrency becomes more and more popular in a sort of weird way, because it's not out there being used as money. Nobody's taking it to the supermarket and buying a loaf of bread with Bitcoin or Tether or anything else. And the question is, what is it doing? Well, having worked through about 4 financial crises in my lifetime, some of them as a regulator and some of them as a private attorney, I know that, these kinds of things tend to be unsupervised and unregulated for some period of time until they get a critical mass. Once they get a critical mass, and I think that's where we are at this point, the government steps in and says, well, wait a minute, let's look at this and see what it's doing. Well, what it's doing is you have a crypto asset with no intrinsic value. Put aside the stablecoin element of cryptocurrency, but in the normal cryptocurrency, you've got a crypto asset that has no intrinsic value, trading on whatever people would like it to be and whatever hype can be driven into that. When you have something like that, there's a very small margin for error, and at some point the air comes out of the balloon and things collapse. Why? There's no government behind it, and there's no central bank behind it. And so when that happens, the question is, has it gotten so big that it has an impact on national or global economics and begins to bring down economies because of a run on cryptocurrency? And that's where the regulators are today, trying to figure out that balance and whether they should step in and regulate. And the problem with all of this, and as a former regulator I know, when you're dealing with technology, you don't want to step in too fast and stop progress. On the other hand, if you wait too long to determine the impact on financial stability or consumers' lives, you may have waited too long.
So am I sensing that you think that at this point this is still tulip mania?
Yes, yeah, I think it's the tulip scandal of the 17th century back here in the 20th. I mean, if you read about the tulip bulb scandal, it sounds eerily similar, right? And the question is, what's the intrinsic value that people are throwing their money at? Now, there is some value in what's been created, and it's not in the crypto world or the crypto asset, I believe. The intrinsic value that's there is in the new networks that are being created by blockchain and other applications that underlie these cryptocurrencies. And those create their own new set of problems, because in peer-to-peer networks such as blockchain, you have a peer-to-peer or person-to-person verification of every transaction. What does that mean? It means it takes trusted intermediaries out of the middle. And who are the trusted intermediaries today? Banks, financial companies, insurance companies, companies like that. They're pulled out of the system. So that's where I'm watching to see how these changes affect the marketplace. But, the more popular place to look is, of course, the crypto assets. And, until somebody shows me where the intrinsic value in crypto is, I'm going to be skeptical.
He is Thomas Vartanian, Executive Director of the Financial Technology and Cybersecurity Center. The book, 200 Years of American Financial Panics, crashes, recessions, depressions, and the technology that will change it all. Professor Vartarian, thanks for joining us again. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Dan. I very much like being back here with you.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them right here on Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
This view was worth a hike.
Right? And it's a good way to stay on top of my health.
Yes, I'm Cologuard, a prescription colon cancer screening option for people 45 plus at average risk. Have you screened for colon cancer?
Not yet.
Don't wait. It's more treatable when caught in early stages.
Tell me more.
Cologuard is non-invasive and it's used at home. It detects altered DNA in your stool to find 92% of colon cancers.
92%?
Yup, even those in early stages.
This was seen in a clinical study with patients 50 and older. Any positive result should be followed by a diagnostic colonoscopy. False positive and negative results may occur. Cologuard is not a replacement for colonoscopy in high-risk patients. Do not use if you have had adenomas, have inflammatory bowel disease and certain hereditary syndromes, or a personal or family history of colon cancer.
Most insured patients pay $0. Ask your provider or an online prescriber if Cologuard is right for you, or visit Cologuard.com.
I'm in.
All right. There's a lot of tough questions when thinking about caring for your aging loved ones. Most importantly, can they stay safe at home? Well, with Home Care Angels Home Services, guess what? They can.